breakfast. Time to talk politics, green stuff with the co-leader of the Greens, Russel Norman, joining us this morning. Good morning, Russell.
Good morning, Ramo.
Who's not sounding too hot, the flash hot this morning. Unfortunately, you've got a wee bit of a cold. It's a bit early for that, though, isn't it? Do you think?
You tend to get, I tend to get whatever's going through Play Centre these days. So,
of course. So it's which could be a euphemism for Parliament, perhaps. All right. Well,
I mean the actual Play Centre.
Yeah, the actual Play Centre. Yeah. Okay. Well, let's dive into some issues. First up this morning, these asylum seekers that are currently in Darwin, the 10 Chinese asylum seekers trying to make their way to New Zealand. They're from the Falun Gong organisation. Should they be allowed here in New Zealand? Should they get here?
Well, I mean, there's a process to go through if you're seeking asylum, and obviously if you're from the Falun Gong, then leaving China, you'd have a pretty good case because the Falun Gong are terribly persecuted in China and imprisoned, and all sorts of dreadful things happen to them.
But can't we just say to the Aussies, look, they're already there, why don't you deal with them?
Well, I certainly think that's true, and Australia should actually process them. But from the media reports, it looks like they don't want to be processed in Australia because they know they get locked up in detention for years. And that's because Australia has such a terrible process for dealing with asylum seekers. Yeah.
So they've already been in this leaky boat. Well, we don't know that it's leaky, but probably not the best boat in the world for a month from Malaysia to Australia. Do you think that we're prepared to let them hop in this same boat and then try to make their way on a perilous journey to New Zealand?
Well, I don't think it's the right thing to do. I think the Australians should just deal with it, and that means having a humane approach to asylum seekers. I mean, if you're in the Falun Gong in China, it's entirely understandable you want to get out because it's very dangerous. So yeah, I mean, the Australians should deal with it.
But if the Australians don't want to deal with it, and they say, no, definitely they're headed towards New Zealand, do we let them get in the boat or do we go over and pick them up? How does this work?
Well, I don't know that we have a lot of control over it. I mean, it's at the moment in the hands of Australia, and if they go into international waters, then who knows where they'll be as they try to make their way to New Zealand. Apparently the boat's okay, but they don't have a lot of experience about how to sail it.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I'd imagine. And this time of the year, things starting to get pretty dicey in the Tasman Sea. I mean, it could end up being our own search and rescue problem, right?
If they make it far enough. I mean, obviously a long part of the journey they'll actually be within Australia's search and rescue area because, they've got to go up around the top and then down the east coast. So it's, Australia should actually just, process them as asylum seekers.
Yeah.
But they don't want to apply for asylum in Australia because of the terrible policies of the Australian government.
Okay, on to more domestic stuff. Does the Labour Party have the support of the Greens for the bill that would extend paid parental leave from 14 weeks to 6 months?
Yeah, I mean, we've been supporters of extending paid parental leave. I mean, giving parents the option of spending more time at home with their new baby is good for the parents and it's good for the babies in terms of actually being able to have that first bit of time at home with your new baby. So, yeah, extending it, we think, is a good investment.
Mm. Okay. Would you extend it? If it was your bill, would it be even more than 6 months?
Possibly. I mean, it's a matter of doing it. I mean, obviously the thing is to, extend it, section by section. I mean, obviously other countries have much more generous provisions than we do in terms of, new parents and their babies. So we're currently, 18 weeks. So extending it to 26 weeks is a start, which, and then let's look at what's affordable further down the track. But, I mean, the first instance, it does make sense to extend it.
Okay. Euthanasia back in the headlines after an Auckland man is accused of helping his chronically ill wife take her own life. Do the Greens have an official stance on euthanasia?
No, we deal with it as a conscience issue. So it's up to individual MPs to vote on it.
Is there currently a private member's bill floating around at all dealing with this?
I don't think there is, actually. I don't think there's one in the ballot, and there certainly hasn't been one pulled from... There was one in the past. I think it was Peter Brown from New Zealand First got one pulled on it.
Right. So completely off the political agenda, really, isn't it?
Pretty much.
Yeah. Okay, on to some more environmental stuff. I was wondering if you know a little bit more about this. All I'm seeing is the headline here that Transpower is being accused of gaming the system by stockpiling a dangerous pollutant to avoid a levy that's going to be introduced in 2013. What do you know about that?
Well, there's a whole bunch of chemicals that are used in transmission that have quite significant greenhouse effects, and so what Transpower is trying to do is get their hands on a bunch of these chemicals before they fall under the ETS, so basically to save themselves some money.
Well, so these are chemicals that have an adverse effect on what?
Well, they can have their greenhouse gases.
Okay.
Yeah.
So just in the process of this is new to me. So just you could have hydropower, which doesn't have an effect on greenhouse gases, but in the transmission of that power, you can have an effect.
Well, it depends on whether it's released or not. So the gas isn't necessarily released. So it just depends on it has to be released into the atmosphere. So what's happening is that these gases will fall under the ETS.
Right.
And that is the use of these gases. But actually, whether they have a greenhouse effect depends on their release. So Transpower is trying to save itself some money by grabbing hold of some of this stuff before it gets under the ETS.
So these chemicals, do you know some more technical details? Are they in transformers or are they actually in the lines?
I actually don't know the answer to that. I'm pretty sure they're in the transformers.
Oh, interesting.
I'd have to check.
And obviously, in order for them to be worried about the ETS, they have quite a lot of these chemicals.
Yeah.
Interesting. Russell, Norman, I hope you do get better before next week and rest up. Thanks very much for joining us this morning.
All right. Cheers, mate.
Co-leader of the Greens, Russell Norman.